Hello, in this video we'll be talking about nomenclature of covalent compounds. But before starting that, let's remember how to name the ionic compounds. Ionic compounds were made from some ions like sodium chloride. Sodium is positively charged, chlorine is negatively charged in here. If you have a metal and nonmetal, this was an ionic compound. We have sodium, so we were first saying the name of the metal, so it is sodium. Right. So the name of the nonmetal actually is chlorine, but we drop the ending, then add the suffix "ide." Chlorine becomes chloride. Sodium chloride is the name of this compound. In some cases, if you remember, we were using Roman numerals. For example, FeCl2 and FeCl3, they both are iron chlorides. This is iron chloride, that is iron chloride. However, in the first one, the charge of iron is 2 plus. And in the second one, the charge of iron is iron 3 plus. In order to distinguish these two compounds from one another, you say that this is iron 2 chloride, and then you say iron 3 chloride. For sodium chloride, I didn't use any Roman numerals because, as you remember, sodium is in the first group of the periodic table, first group elements, second group elements, they take only one charge. Sodium always is +1. That's why you don't need to mention about the charge of it. But iron might be +2 or +3. That's why you need to mention about the charge of iron in iron chloride. Okay. Let's talk about the covalent compounds then. Covalent compounds are formed by a combination of a nonmetal with another nonmetal. How are we going to name covalent compounds? Two nonmetallic elements can combine in several different ways. Consider nitrogen oxides. Nitrogen can combine with oxygen to give you this, N2O, or this, NO, or this, N2O3, or this, N2O4, or this, N2O5. As you see, there are a lot of possibilities in here. They all are nitrogen oxides, but they are different compounds. In order to distinguish these compounds from one another, we need to do something. This time, we are not using the Roman numerals, but instead we will be using Greek prefixes. I'll be giving you from 1 to 7. There are more actually, but I think these are going to be enough for most of the cases. So instead of saying 1 to represent the number of atoms in the covalent compound, we are going to be using the prefix mono. Instead of saying 2, we will be using the prefix di. Instead of saying 3, we will be using 3. 4 is going to be tetra, 5 is penta, 6 is hexa, and 7 is hepta. So we will be using these Greek prefixes to distinguish covalent compounds like these from one another. The main rule is like this. You first say the number of the first nonmetal, then you continue with the name of the first nonmetal, then you say the number of the second nonmetal, then you say the name of the second nonmetal. When you are naming the second nonmetal, you again are going to be doing something like this. So you will be dropping the ending, then add the suffix "ide." Let's try some examples. We have this compound N2O5. In order to name this compound, you first need to mention about the number of the first nonmetal. I have 2 nitrogens. So instead of 2, I will be saying di. The first nonmetal is nitrogen, so I'll just say the name of the first nonmetal, nitrogen. Then I need to say how many oxygens we have. We have 5 oxygens, so it's going to be penta. And the name of the second nonmetal is oxygen actually, but we will be dropping that ending and add "ide." Oxygen will become oxide. Penta oxide. However, pentaoxide is hard to write, hard to read. That's why they often drop this A and we say pentoxide instead of saying pentaoxide. Let's continue with the second one. P2O3. First we say the number of the first nonmetal. It is 2. I again say di. The name of the first nonmetal, it is phosphorus. So I say diphosphorus. Then I need to say the number of the second nonmetal. It is 3. So I say 3. And the second nonmetal is again oxygen. Instead of oxygen, we will be using oxide. Oxide. We dropped the ending, added the suffix "ide." Here we have CO2. Now we have 1 carbon in here and 2 oxygens. So when you have the first nonmetal, only 1, you don't need to say the number of the first nonmetal. So we don't say monocarbon, but instead we say just carbon. Then after I have 2 oxygens in here, so I would say di, okay, to represent the number of oxygens. Then I say oxide. Carbon dioxide is the name of this compound. Next is N2O. I have 2 nitrogens, 1 oxygen. Now, when you have the first nonmetal only 1, you don't need to say the number of it. You don't say monocarbon. But if you have the second nonmetal only 1, then you would be saying the number of the second nonmetal. So it's going to be dinitrogen. So you have 1 of the second nonmetal, but you still are going to be saying the number of it. Mono. Again, it's going to be monoxide. Again, as it was in here, it is hard to say this, monoxide. That's why we drop 1 of these and it becomes dinitrogen monoxide. And finally, PbCl3. I have 1 phosphorus. If you have the first nonmetal, 1, you don't need to say the number of it, so it's gonna be phosphorus. Then I have 6 chlorines. 6 is hexa. Then chlorine becomes chloride. Okay, here we have 4 more. For each of them, I'll wait a little bit. Please pause the video after each. So now, pause the video and try N2O4. Yes, we have 2 nitrogens, so we say di. The first nonmetal is nitrogen, so I say dinitrogen. Then I have 4 oxygens. Instead of 4, we say tetra. Then instead of oxygen, we say oxide. Again, we don't say tetraoxide, we drop this one and we say tetroxide. Now pause the video and try the second one. Okay, so I have sulfur as the first nonmetal. When you have first nonmetal, only 1, you don't say mono, so it's going to be just sulfur. Then I have 3 oxygens, so 3 is going to be 3. And we have oxygen, so it's going to become oxide. Okay, now pause the video and try this one. We have 1 carbon, so we just say carbon. And we have 1 oxygen. If you have the second nonmetal, only 1, then you still need to say mono. Monoxide. Monoxide, we don't say monoxide, we say monoxide. And finally, water. How would we name it in the systematic way? Pause the video and try it. Okay, I have 2 hydrogens, so I say di, and the first nonmetal is hydrogen. And oxygen is the second one. I have only 1 of it, so I say monoxide again. Thank you for watching.